Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Environmental Justice Now. My name is Leah Jones, and I am the Organizing and Water Justice Coordinator here at VAIPL. Hope everybody's doing well. Before we get started today, I'd like to do a very brief land acknowledgement. While we are on a video call and many of us are joining in from different places, we want to remind ourselves that we gather on the unceded land of the indigenous peoples. I am joining in from so-called Richmond, Virginia, and I am on the land of the Powhatan and Chickahominy peoples. If you are unsure of whose land you are on and you would like to find out, you can always visit native-land.ca to find out. Happy Friday, everyone. Thanks for joining us again for another episode this week. In this week's episode, we will continue our discussion that we've been having on the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative and Virginia's participation. So today, as we know, at a time like this, climate disasters we've seen happening left and right, when people across the state and the nation and abroad, of course, are already suffering so much from climate disruption at record-breaking levels. It's up to us to urge our legislators to end this destruction of our environment and stand by the initiatives like the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative that positively impact our communities. So we need your help to keep weatherization and flood preparedness assistance program funded in our state. And this episode, we have just a little bit more info in case you missed our last show on Reggie. And joining us today to dive more into it is Kadeska Bray. Hey, Kades, how are you?
Hi, Leah. So nice to be here. I haven't been on the show for a while, so it's good to be back and show my face again. And thanks for everyone who's joining and watching us today. So thank you.
Awesome. Yeah. So I think once again, I know we were able to talk about Reggie a little bit in a past environmental justice now just a few weeks ago, but with a really big action coming up, or comment period rather coming up for Reggie, we just would love to reiterate and continue getting the information out to everyone in case you don't understand what the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative is and how it benefits Virginians and why it's so important that we stay a part of this program. So, Kadesh, do you maybe want to start with just giving a little bit of background on the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative and how Virginia entered this program?
Absolutely. We wanted to start with talking about how we even got into Reggie, right? And there's been from our current administration a lot of tries to remove us out of Reggie. But however, we want to emphasize that Reggie is the law. And how Reggie became the law is in 2020, Delegate Herring and Senator Lewis passed bills from both the House and the Senate, respectively, titled Reggie Funding to Support Low Income Energy Efficiency Programs. So basically, they were able to pass bills that got us to join Reggie and divide the funds that we can get from Reggie into multiple different programs, right? So these two legislations authorize the Commonwealth to directly auction carbon allowances. So basically, the carbon that a lot of our polluters pay for through the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative auction process, and to use the revenues for the following purposes. 50% of the revenues would go to the Department of Energy for low income energy efficiency programs. So that looks like weatherization, home improvements, and other things that will help low income folks who are struggling to pay their electricity bills to lower those bills. 45% of that revenue then will go towards resilience investments. This looks like preparing localities for flooding and resiliency plans and making sure we update a lot of our localities resilience plans, flood resilience plans to match the current climate crisis. And just this year alone, we have seen hurricane after hurricane. So this was back in 2020, what people have, not only our delegates and senators, but our community activists who saw that this was going to be an issue moving forward and decided to invest at least 45% of that revenue into flood resilience investments. And the rest, those 3% and 2%, will go to the DEQ administrative fees and for DEQ to implement climate change planning and meditation activities, especially related to low income communities. So, and then the low income energy efficiency programs will be managed by Department of Energy in collaboration with Department of Housing and Community Development. And the low income energy efficiency investments will focus on affordable housing construction and renovation projects targeting low income and extremely low income individuals through a partnership with the Virginia Housing Trust Fund and through the Virginia Public Housing Transformation Initiative. So this is, I want to emphasize this part and the need to keep RGGI because it does help the most vulnerable Virginians, right? It was intentionally put into law with this language, with this breakdown, so that our most vulnerable folks, our most vulnerable neighbors aren't left behind when it is time to really implement climate meditation initiatives, right? And it's been time, and RGGI in 2020 kind of reemphasized that need to center low income and folks that are poor. And so the basic breakdown that might have seemed a little complicated. So RGGI is basically a tool to direct polluting businesses that operate in Virginia to meet our clean energy targets. It penalizes polluting industries from wanting to continue to pollute our air and our water by building fossil fuels, for examples. And it incentivizes them to transition towards renewable energy, right? And when you keep getting penalties, hopefully you will change your behavior. And then polluters, we want to emphasize that polluters are the ones who pay those financial penalties, and the money is directed to help many Virginian communities that are suffering from climate-related issues like flooding, housing, and energy burden. And the money, like I said, goes to two things: flood preparedness and low and middle income home improvements to help with energy bills. And the fact of the matter is, 2/3 of Virginians want to stay in RGGI. That's how it became a law, right? That's how we were able to convince our General Assembly, our representatives, to allow us to direct these funds for the most vulnerable neighbors, and also to allow us to join this program that is a multi-state initiative. And like I want to emphasize, elected officials and our representative sponsored and voted for RGGI funds to be allocated towards the most impacted by the climate crisis. And we want to keep it that way.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Kades. I think you did a great job breaking it down. Simply put, RGGI is a huge, important stepping stone and opportunity to begin to approach solutions and provide resources for those who are already feeling the impacts of climate change the most, which are our most vulnerable communities that are already burdened by other injustices. So RGGI allows us the opportunity, the resources, the funds to provide those communities that need it the most, in efforts towards resilience, towards energy efficiency. These are all things that we cannot keep ignoring because it will only continue to get worse. Which I think, I guess, to make it even clearer, we can now just talk about a couple of stats, like how exactly is RGGI helping Virginians here? These are the numbers. RGGI, in its time since it was passed, has already raised over $400 million dollars dedicated to community improvement programs, like Kades was mentioning, with flood resiliency and electric bills. It's already also funded the construction of more than 2,300 highly efficient affordable housing units. And on top of all of those efforts, the program has also awarded over 49 grants at this point, I believe, because the new round just came out, totaling over $30 million in efforts to combat the flooding that we've seen across our state. With hopefully more on the way through our community flood preparedness fund that is once again all because of Reggie, that we even have that fund in the first place. So in addition to all of those awesome statistics, all of those awesome, I guess, resources and funds and projects that have been ongoing in the state, I think it's also really important to point out that Reggie is also working to benefit our vulnerable communities, not just in a sense of Black and Brown communities or lower income communities, but also for our communities in rural areas in Virginia, which are often left out as well. And even though Southwestern Virginia, their power is generated a lot from Old Dominion Power, who officially does not participate in the Reggie program. However, with being a part of the Reggie program here in the state, it still is able to provide funds to Southwest Virginia, which is huge. Because once again, a lot of Southwest Virginia is oftentimes left behind in this conversation of climate resiliency and, making efforts towards taking action as we move towards a more climate resilient and more a climate resilient world. um but those are all huge, right? Rural communities, lower income communities, Black and Brown communities, all benefiting from Reggie funds, and being a part of this program, even so much so that we can see it benefiting families across the state in real ways, like lowering energy bills from $300 to $100. Like, think about how much money that is in your pocket when you're thinking about paying your bills, having money for groceries for your families. Like, all of these things are connected, and being able to spend money on those necessities for life and your well-being instead of your electric bill, I think is life changing. So, Reggie, it's definitely something that we should not sleep on. It is definitely something that we need to make sure our governor knows, that, like Kadesh said, 2/3, and hopefully even more than 2/3 at this point, do believe in supporting Reggie. Virginians want this program, and it is working, despite what we may have heard from other sources. So I think that's a good segue into maybe talking a little bit about what's actually going on now with Reggie, and some of the defenses that we've heard um, against it, and why those are totally, in addition to what I've said already, what we've said earlier, why it's so important that we combat those defenses.
Absolutely. I don't want to jump deep into the messaging of a lot of the opposition for Reggie because, like we said, we've been trying to keep this message positive and say that this is a law and that we have been defending this legislation since 2020. We fought for it so that our most vulnerable populations can be protected from the climate crisis, right? And also the current crisis that is high energy bills. At the IPL, we worked really hard to alleviate the energy burden, which is basically high energy bills that a lot of folks face in Virginia. Being that we do rank on top 10 for the highest energy bills in the nation, and Reggie, with Leah's last point being that you can go from 300 to 100 makes a big difference. For instance, if your bill is 700 and you can go down to 300, right? So what we've done to protect this awesome initiative in the past, just this past legislation session alone, um, with our environmental coalitions and awesome partners, we were able to defeat 10 bills that try to either take the funds from Reggie and redirect them in different initiatives rather than for low income and vulnerable populations. Or we've defeated bills that outright wanted to repeal the program, right? Our supporters and a lot of Virginians stood up and said, no, these are not proper. ways to handle the funds from Reggie, or we want to stay in Reggie. And we um, also defeated the budget process, like I said, where folks have tried through bills to really persuade our General Assembly to move these funds for other purposes. And our General Assembly in 2022, this year, in January through February and March, affirmed that's not the right way to go, right? And so, what is happening now, right? So, right now, our administration has started a regulatory process to withdraw Virginia from Reggie. This is an attempt to end our participation in Reggie, and it will be a month-long process. And it also has opportunities for the public and for Virginia residents to weigh in and have our voices heard, right? Ultimately, our administration is putting this in the hands of Virginia's Air Pollution Control Board to decide if we do stay or leave. However, we do have, I believe it's approaching to end next Wednesday, but an opportunity to comment on this issue. So our administration has taken the first step in the process to repeal the re- regulation required for our participation in Reggie, and they issued a notice of intent regulatory action, basically that outlines why it is pursuing the repeal. And this law had a 3-day window for the public comment notice, and we are now down to, I believe, 7 days. And so, what can you do, right? Please submit comments opposing the repeal. Comments may be submitted to the Virginia Town Hall website, and we have a bit.ly link ready for you to make it short and sweet, so that you can just click on it and go and comment. And like I said, it ends on October 26th. And we are urging folks to comment because our administration needs to realize and understand that the broad public, and our Virginians and our supporters do support and want to stay in this program, and we must counteract false and misleading narratives being circulated in the public sphere, such as Reggie's attacks on polluters. It literally penalizes polluters for the carbon emissions they put in the air. Virginia residents are not taxed, and if it does show up in your electric bill as a rack, it is a $2.29 charge compared to, let's say, what you will see for a fuel factor charge that can be up to $20 to $24. So Reggie is a small rack that you see on your electricity bill, but it helps so much for our communities, and it allows us to get, like Leah was saying, 400 million whopping dollars for initiatives to help us survive the climate crisis, and help us get away from needing initiatives that will cap greenhouse gases, because there won't be any greenhouse gases in the future, right? And this is just the first step. And it was a hopeful step, and allowed Virginia to say, hey, we appreciate clean energy. We want clean energy and water and our natural resources to be protected for our future children. And it showed us as a leader in the South, um, us being the only South state in this multi-state program, right? So we want to keep that. We want to keep Virginia forward. So please submit your comments.
Yes, let's keep Virginia from moving backwards. Thanks, Kadas. You worded that perfectly. On that note, I think we can send everyone off. Please take action. Leave a comment in support of Reggie, even if it's very brief, even if it's just a few of the points that we mentioned on the show today, written down, typed out. It's important that our administration, our decision makers, all know how much Virginians do support Reggie, and believe in it and believe in all of the benefits that it's bringing to the state. So please make your comments when you can. Share it with your family, friends, networks, coalition spaces, all that good stuff. And hopefully, we can keep Virginia in Reggie. We will. We will not move backwards.
Absolutely.
So, on that note, as usual, please also join VIPL if you want to keep up to date with what we're doing. You can sign on to our newsletter. where you can always stay up to date with what we're into, and access to resources like this link right here, which will allow you to easily access Reggie comments. So, yes, we will see you all next week on the show. And we hope that you make your Reggie comments. Bye, everyone.
Bye.